spirituals too.
Quiet down. Okay. Um, I appreciate seeing little rows of green in a field just next to my driveway. Thank you, Steve, and your crew.
You're welcome.
Well, as I'd mentioned earlier, joy for me was to spend some time with my three sisters. You know, our siblings, we don't get together very often these days for various reasons. A sorrow I had was that yesterday was my next youngest cousins. There were 5 of us boy cousins who grew up together, all a year apart, stair-stepped. It was his and his wife's 50th anniversary. And so a bunch of the cousins were also getting together for a surprise anniversary party in just outside of Greenville, Ohio. And so I got to see a couple pictures of the cousins. And of course, none of us have changed a bit over the years. But he looks more and more like his dad all the time, except heavier. So I never thought he looked that much like his father, but he really does. So it was I was sorry I missed that. But 2 of the sisters will be this way again on Friday, as Linda's decided to go back on the train to Colorado with Julie and stay for a week out there, and then she'll fly back into Indy and pick up her car. So having lots of sibling time over the next couple weeks, which is fun. And Nancy loves it too. Don't you? Well, we're gonna enter into a little bit of silence now and give God thanks for the many good things that are blessing us in our lives. Much to pray about, be concerned, of course, still with situations in Ukraine and Gaza, and even in the United States with all the unrest at times here politically, which is can be disturbing and kind of heartrending. But let's lift them to God and trust his loving kindness overall. As I mentioned, I was telling jokes at the kids' table. And this morning, as I thought about the topic, a joke occurred to me that was on a Sunday morning, a man is finally really sleeping in and he looks at his wife and he goes, I really don't want to go to church today. And she goes, well, you have to. And he goes, why? And she goes, well, I'll give you 2 good reasons. She goes, 1, you're 35 years old and you need to set an example for the children. And the second is, you're the minister. So So my sermon this morning is actually titled Reasons to Go to Meeting. And this is reason number 3. I don't know why I just picked number 3, but it's because you need the rest. Okay, the scripture reading this morning comes from Genesis. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, "Let there be light." And there was light. And God saw the light was good. And he separated the light from the darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening and there was morning the first day. And skipping ahead, by the 7th day, God had finished the work he'd been doing. And so on the 7th day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating he'd done. Well, and you thought you had a tough week. In just 6 days, God has taken chaos and given it form, calling into existence the entirety of the universe. Of course, it appears it was an office job. God merely spoke and things leapt into being. The only time God seems to get dirty is when making humans, and then he mucks around in the dirt some. Some of us get amused by that irony of we came out of dirt. And then God performs the first recorded surgery, taking Adam's rib and creating Eve. So no wonder a rest is called for. Now, in the interest of biblical literacy, I have to say that the Bible makes no claim that these were 24-hour days. There are those who think they are. In fact, there's no time, as we understand it, until God separates the light and the dark. Still, regardless, that's a lot of work in a week, no matter how long the days were. But the workload's not what's important. What's important is what happens on the last day, and that is that God rest. Regardless of hymns that say unresting and as silent as light, the Bible says God rested. Which brings us for a good reason to go to meeting. It's because you need the rest. And there are a lot of stories about coming to church and resting. And believe me, anybody who's been a pastor has heard most of them, mostly from the congregations who find them a skit. One of my favorites is this one. If you took all the people who fell asleep in church and laid them end to end, well, they'd be a lot more comfortable. I remember when I first started attending Plainfield meeting in 1981, Ben and Dorothy Anderson, who some of you knew, attended there. And I mean, Ben, he is a hoot in the first place. They were so frugal. I mean, his glasses were always taped together with surgical tape where he'd broken them and didn't want to go buy a new pair, and held around his neck with rubber bands in the back. But Benny, he sang in the choir and was prone to falling asleep. And some of us younger guys started a pool every Sunday about what time, because meeting started at 9:40. And so would he be asleep by 10, by 10:10, and we didn't have any money on it, but it was just a lot of fun to see Benny starting to drop off, and Dorothy couldn't elbow him because she was in the row in front of him. Ben Franklin, in his autobiography, records his first encounter with Quakers upon landing in Philadelphia. He was poor and hungry and tired, and he says, "I walked up a street by which this time had many clean-dressed people in it who were all walking the same way. I joined them and thereby was led into the great meeting house of the Quakers near the market. That meeting house is still there if you go to Philadelphia. I sat down among them, and after looking around and hearing nothing, said, being very drowsy through labor and want of rest the previous night, I fell fast asleep, and continued so till meeting broke up, when one of the Quakers was kind enough to rouse me. This was, therefore, the first house I was in or slept in Philadelphia. That was the Arch Street meeting, which is still there. Even the Bible has the story about sleeping in church. It's recorded in Acts 20. Seated in a window was a young man named Eutychus, who was sinking into a deep sleep as Paul talked on and on. When he was sound asleep, he fell to the ground from the third story and was picked up dead. Paul went down, threw himself on the young man, put his arms around him, and said, "Don't be alarmed. He's alive." Now, I don't know why more pastoral pastors among friends don't invoke this passage when they're warning about sleeping in church, unless it's because many of them are familiar with the King James version of this story, which records it as Paul was long in preaching. It's bad enough the NIV saying Paul talked on and on, but no preacher wants to be convicted of contributing to somebody's death. Despite all the silly stories about sleeping, I still would say that I think it's coming to meeting is because we need a rest. We need a break. I think that's why the record of Genesis tells us that God rested. The divine spirit setting an example, showing we need time away from the demands of daily life. Among the early Hebrews, the Sabbath was associated with the idea of rest, worship, and divine favor. Among friends, for many years, it was held that way. No entertainment was to be had on first day, as the early friends called it. You were to refrain from too much visiting even on Sunday morning with family and that's part of the problem at times is we come up with all these taboos and regulations and rules, etc., about what it means to rest. If we're honest, Sunday has become for many of us just another day, full of hectic scheduling. There are places to go, people to see, jobs that have to get done. I'm talking about me as much as anybody. We want to go visit. Michael was out walking in the woods this morning, and as he was walking in the woods, a tree fell in front of him. So now they want to get their chainsaws out and go chop it up today. But we rarely get a break. And when there's too much to do, church sometimes meeting is just one more thing to do. It's easy to put aside, and they're even less rested. Now, as the jokes show, some folks may frown upon the idea of coming, especially others, coming to church to get some rest. When I was a pastor, I was often asked if folks sleeping in church in meeting bothered me. I said, not so long as they don't snore. It doesn't. And I mean it. It seems to me that in this world of busyness, we need a haven of rest and refreshment. And God speaks to us all in different ways, whether it be a still small voice from within or a loud mouth without, or the peace that comes from rest. With just a little bit of tongue in my cheek, I remind you of a verse in Joel, and it shall come to pass afterwards that I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, and your old men shall dream dreams. Well, I don't know if he meant in worship, but so what if they do? I always thought about, again, I think about Benny, this hard-working farmer, Ben Anderson, and I think it was one of the few places he did actually sit and rest and relax and found healing for his soul. I've often found that people who've had their eyes closed in worship have often heard more than those whose eyes were open, but wandering around the room and just looking things. Jesus himself says, "Come unto me, all ye who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take your yoke upon me and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly, and you shall find rest in your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Many of us are familiar with an old gospel song called "I Heard the Voice of Jesus Say," is "Come unto me and rest." And way back in my misspent young adult years, I was an inveterate record buyer. And one time I bought this record by a fellow named Turley Richards, who many people have never heard of. But on it was this amazing version. It's mostly folk songs, but there's an amazing version of "I Heard the Voice of Jesus Say." And it's so soulful, this white guy singing this. And it's about 5 minutes long, his interpretation of it. And it's so moving. And I've treasured that for years. I got it in 1970. Turley and I have later become friends through the wonder of Facebook and email. And one time I asked him, I said, that the other songs are great and I enjoy them, but that "I heard the voice of Jesus say," I said, "it's so powerful. How did you achieve that?" He goes, "I was just before I went to the recording studio in New York that night. I just come from my doctor because I was having some sight issues. And he said he told me I was going to be blind, that within 5 years I would lose my sight. And he said, and that song was not on the original list the way it came out, but I decided to do it because I needed to hear the voice of Jesus say, 'Come unto me and rest. Come unto me, I will give you rest, rest unto your souls.'" What a glorious invitation and a guilt-free reason to come to meeting. So if you want to blank your screen and take a nap during our worship times together, feel free and enjoy and be blessed by this day of rest. Thank you, Norma. And we'll now continue with program worship and say Godspeed to those who have other obligations and need to leave at this time. And we hope to see you next week.
Brent, and I just want to add here that I'll get to hear the rest of what you've had to say tonight on Zoom. But and when you said, come to a meeting and listen for the Lord, I went like this. And the Lord said, Dave, you know the 11th commandment. If everything else fails, reboot. I did, and it worked.
The Lord speaks in mysterious ways.
No, I am reminded of all the times in which I'm sort of directed in various ways to look beyond the present moment, to be present in the present moment, but also to see it situated in a bigger span of life, of events. I'm sitting here, and this parking lot is surrounded by trees, and I'm hearing the birds and watching the neighbors jog by, and it just has this sort of sense of momentary motionless in sort of the rough and tumble of the day, of the life. And thinking about how, you know, say in my 12-step work, we're admonished to take it easy and to and to just, to do things just for today, um I was thinking, if I could import this feeling of of that's generated by this Sabbath, I could bring this Sabbath feeling to the courtroom and to all the other places where there's so much conflict in the world, how much ease there would be. Uh, there's just a beauty in being able to see what is here in front of me and to carry that with me in my heart. When sometimes I'm just seized with anxiety or pressure about the things that must get done, remembering that no matter what happens, I do it, I don't do it. There's a power greater than myself that will heal and guide me and ensure that that however things turn out, there will be, for whoever is involved, peace and love and connection and rest.
Are all hearts clear? If so, we'll close meeting for worship for today. I
Thank
do
you,
hope
Brent,
he
for your
finds
message.
spaces of rest today.
Brent, what was your friend's last name? Turley, what?
Richards, Turley Richards.
Did he end up going blind?
Yes, he is. He's blind. He lives in Louisville now and still does music all the time and has done music since that time, put out a number of albums. But if you look up on YouTube, I heard The Voice of Jesus by Turley Richards, you'll hear this. At least I think it is absolutely amazing version of it. And I just had an old scratched up LP from years of use, and he actually sent me a clean copy of it recently, and it still moves me. So, well, have a grand day, everyone, and a good week, and hope to see you next Sunday.
God willing.
Hi.
Thanks, Brent. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brent.
Sure.